Despite my best effort to evade the NAMMthrax, I think I might have fallen a victim to the NAMMthrax yet again. Roll that intro.
Hey guys, this is Gus G and you're watching Guitar Gear Guy. Thank you for tuning in.
Hello everyone, how are you? This is yours truly, Triple G, coming at you once again. It is about 4 days after the annual Winter NAMM show. Before I start this video, which I think it's gonna be a pretty long, lengthy video, I did take a poll on YouTube and Facebook whether you guys preferred short multiple videos or one lengthy video, and overwhelmingly just about everybody voted for one lengthy video, so that's what's gonna be. And from what you can probably hear, I did catch the what's probably the NAMMthrax. Each year I do take precautions to make sure that I don't catch anything at the Winter NAMM show. You know, there are thousands of people touching the same guitars, and God knows the guy before you, what he has, you know, and what kind of germs and viruses he's laying down on the guitar you're about to touch. I wash my hands religiously when I'm at the show. I take the sanitizer, I take the emergency to boost my immunity, and like a ginseng extract, but none of that shit worked, and I am feeling not as hot as I would normally like. Okay, so before the actual video begins, I want to start by mentioning Ozzy, who a couple days ago was in the news for having the Parkinson's disease. You know, I hope things work out better for him. And you know, Ozzy, whether you like him or not, has given us over the years great music. Especially I love his years with Randy Rhoads, Jakey Lee, and even later years with the Zach, and you know, earlier his career with Black Sabbath. So he's a monumental figure in the music that you and I probably commonly like. And you know, I'm in my late 40s, which means a lot of the guys that I grew up listening to, either they have already passed or they are not doing very well. Just a couple days ago also, Neil Peart, the drummer of the band Rush, has passed away. So basically these things are going to just continue to happen. All my heroes, childhood heroes that I grew up listening to, that you grew up listening to, they are going to you know, leave us one way or another. Alright, so this video here, I'm just gonna break it into 3 big chunks. The first bit will be overall impressions and new shit, and the second bit would be the what I just lovingly call as interesting shit, and the third section will be the guitars that I will probably be getting this year based on the things that I saw at the NAMM show. Okay, so let's just start with the overall impressions of the show, and I want to start by asking, for 2 years in a row, I was not able to find the Schecter booth, the Schecter showroom. I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't know where they're hiding. Used to be, they used to sit right next to ESP, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. I couldn't find Schecter, and I'm watching YouTube, and there are other guys like Andertons that you know, showed guitars out of the Schecter booth. I'm like, where the hell are they? I even looked at the directory at the show floor and I couldn't find it, so I got no Schecter coverage for you. And then over the years, you know, PV always had really big presence. Hartley PV would be there, and they have a huge showroom where they would have all their amps and, you know, the 6505s and Invectives, and even the guitars like the Avenger models that they have. They would always have a pretty huge presence. And even a couple of years ago, they had like a Courtney Cox of the Iron Maidens perform at a stage that they had and things like that. However, this year they had a very small presence, and really basically really no guitar related stuff. I think it was just like the pro audio kind of deal, and PV really didn't have any presence at all. And those of you who've been watching my NAMM videos, you know that there have been a couple of years where Gibson really hasn't shown up. Either they weren't there at all, or they had a very minimal presence, or they had what the moments where they would have things like the KRK audio monitors with the Les Paul flame top front, and they're trotting out stuff like that, and things were really looking sketch for a couple of years with Gibson, but they're really increasing their presence at the show under the new regime after Henry was ousted. I think they're really getting their crap together correctly, and you could really see the renewed focus on the brands that they owned, like a Kramer and especially Epiphone. They revamped the entire lineup. The headstock now looks a lot more, closer to that of Gibson, and they had some exciting new colors. I mean, some color options, not my particular cup of tea, but it's always a good thing to see colors that's besides black and red. So that was really nice. However, the WTF moment from Gibson this year was the whole Slash signature lineup. Right before the show started, they released the new Slash collection, which had the Les Paul standards with the Slash colors and all these other things. And then, as you guys know, those of you who have been watching me, I do own a Slash Rosso Corsa from 2013, I want to say. That thing cost me a chunk of change. Spectacular guitar, I love it and everything. So Slash is the flag bearer of the whole Gibson brand. This is the man back in the early 90s or late 80s, basically single-handedly brought Gibson back to the forefront of electric guitars and basically saved the brand, I want to say. And even today in 2020, they're trotting out Slash signature, which is great. I'm a huge fan of Slash. I got no issue with this, but they also had Slash signature acoustics at Gibson. And if I remember correctly, I don't think Slash is really known to play Gibson acoustic. Isn't it Guild that he plays? I could be wrong, so check me on that. Now, Gibson was on the third floor of the show, and another huge company that was on the third floor was Fender and Fender Musical Instrument Company, which included Charvel, Jackson, and what's the other brand? EVH and some other brand. Is it Gretsch? Forget. Anyhow, so Fender had a huge showroom again, just as last year. They brought out the Telecaster Acoustasonic last year at last NAMM show, which was turned out to be a huge hit. This year, right before the show, we were introduced to the new Acoustasonic that is based on Stratocaster, and yours truly had the opportunity to sit down and mess with it, and I tell you what, that is a really great guitar. Is it worth $2,000? I don't know. That's somewhat debatable. They did have multiple colors available, and that guitar is such a perfect couch guitar. You just sit on the couch, you're watching TV, and you're just noodling, because it does have enough acoustic projection, so you could definitely just work on it as an acoustic guitar. And it has 10 different voicings from the piezo and the actual pickup that's on there, the blend knob that controls the amount of blending from the piezo and the pickup. So that was a really great guitar. And if you guys haven't seen it, Fender has a video out that has a Tyler Bryant and what's the other guy's name? Name escapes me. But anyhow, they're dueling with two different Acoustasonic guitars, and it's just such well done. And what the Acoustasonic Stratocaster reminded me of is that's such a perfect guitar for a working musician when you have a gig and you can't go from acoustic to electric in between a set or in between one song. You could just have that one guitar and just cover a whole different range. And I grew up in the 80s and early 90s listening to hair metal and power ballads and whatever. So that guitar reminded me of just a perfect tool, perfect guitar to do stuff like Mr. Big, White Lion, that kind of thing, where you know the first verse and the intro is done acoustic guitar, and then they kick it into higher gear with the electric guitar coming in on the second verse, chorus, and stuff. So Acoustasonic was really awesome. Of course, the new Ultra series just everywhere. And what made the headline at the Fender booth this year was the reintroduction of the Lead series and HM Strat from the 80s. So HM Strat, heavy metal Strat, that was their answer back in the 80s to combat the the hair metal guitars of Ibanez's and Jackson's. That was Fender's answer, even though I felt that it never really caught on. But you wouldn't be able to tell that by seeing Greg Howe from way back then, where he was wielding his HM Strat. And they reintroduced that this year, very vibrant colors and everything. So as I was looking at the Lead series and the HM Strat, I go, that's really nice to have, but who's been asking for those? Who's asking for those guitars? So, like HM Strat, you could definitely get that kind of guitar out of Charvel, which is owned by Fender. And Lead series, I don't know if there is enough difference in there for someone to just be pining for that line of guitar. Of course, again, the colors were really nice, but again, I just kind of walked away thinking, who's asking for these? So staying with the Fender owned brand, so Jackson had a new Gus G Shooting Star guitar with a different color. It had a white binding, so that was kind of cool. Jackson has, now before the show, if you have been watching all my videos, in one of the couple videos ago, I mentioned something about, I was doing the pre-show for the NAMM, and I said, God forbid if Jackson comes out with Jeff Loomis' signature Jackson Kelly in a more affordable version, I'm gonna be down for it. Guess what? Jackson does, and they did introduce the Jackson Jeff Loomis Pro Series, street price of $13.99. Kelly, just, and I stood there and I compared the $4,000 US custom shop model versus the the Indonesian import that's gonna sell at $1,300 or $1,400, whatever it is. And I tell you what, it's yes, you could totally see that the US model has a little bit more posh feeling, but that Indonesian import is nothing to laugh at. I mean, the raw finish on the body felt great, and the embossed Jackson logo on the headstock looked great. Overall, guitar really felt great, and I don't need to have the US version of this guitar, so the import one is just gonna do fine. So I'll be in the market for that guitar. And then the EVH had the Frankenstein, Eddie Van Halen, famous Frankenstein guitar in relic finish. It's a Mexican made. They did a really good job with that guitar, it appears. The aesthetics are there, and all the like a taping of the stripes and all the little nuisance, it's close enough. Now, can you shell out $1,800 for that guitar? That I don't know. However, I think the like a super custom shopped one that's a handmade and whatever, I think those command like a $25,000 on eBay or stuff like that. So maybe it's a bargain. I don't know. Not that big fan of Eddie, so it's not my cup of tea. But those of you who are Eddie Van Halen fan, I mean, maybe that's screaming your name. I don't know. And EVH had a whole different colors for their Wolfgangs, and they did have a new amp out, small lunchbox size, which sounded great. By the way, so for those of you who wonder about NAMM, it's really hard for you to check out any gear, the tone of instrument, or what the amp sounds like, because it's just a big pollution of noise on the show floor. Really, you can't get any good assessment of what each equipment is. Now, if you're a big vendor like Andertons and Premier Guitar, what you have access to is like before the show begins, like on Wednesdays, or during the show, you get invited into the little isolated booth of each company where you could go in, and they have a soundproofing, and you could have private demo of you know, what each company offers. Like Friedman had their enclosure where you could walk in and you could hear the amp and whatever. But if you're not in one of those situations, a small time guy like me, you know, you don't get to do that kind of stuff, and so you're just out on the floor just experiencing. So you really can walk away with what the dang thing really sounds like, and there's a decibel police walking around as well, so you really can crank anything. So, you know, if you have not been to the NAMM show, take that forward. Okay, so coming down to the second floor, ESP, as always, had their showroom full of guitars, and it's very dark in ESP, by the way. They had the usual gluttonous display of their custom shop models, lots of sparkly stuff, and they showed a lot of that. And by the way, so when you get to like a ESP custom shop area, you normally see, even if you get there on the day one of the show, like on Thursday, you're gonna see most of all the guitars that have the sold tag on it, meaning one of their dealers already bought that model, so they're just there as a display during the show. And they also had a wall where it said 87 reissue series, and I don't know what 1987 represents to ESP, but apparently it was a big year. So they had a lot of guitars and basses hung on that section. Nothing really groundbreaking out of a ESP, I thought. You know, their custom shop models look great as always do, but nothing really groundbreaking this year, I didn't think. And ESP is now the distributor of Engel line of amps here in the United States. So Engel brought out their new Iron Ball amp. They had the new amp in the pedal format product. And then I own a Fireball 100 Engel, which is a beast of an amp, but it's really hard to crank that at home because and the volume being past 1 basically will just shatter everything in the house. They now have the 25 watt version, which is maybe I should sell my 100 watt and get the 25 watt, which is a lot more manageable. And I think that one also does have a power attenuation built in. So, and then Ernie Ball, you know, every year Ernie Ball never disappoints. Their booth is always just full of people. They have a small stage where they usually have their endorsement artists to always play. This year, Paul Gilbert was huge. Steve Morse was there, and I think a bunch of YouTubers also played, like Fluff, Ryan. I don't know if Jared Dines was there. But anyhow, the Ernie Ball never disappoints, and their Ball family reserve guitars just spectacular. You know, quilted maple top and their maple back. The back of the neck of the guitar is like all like flamey. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful guitars. And then Ernie Ball Music Man has a sister brand, much like how Fender has Squier, Gibson has Epiphone, and Ernie Ball has a brand called Sterling by Music Man. And you know, if in yesteryear you were disappointed by the offerings of like an Epiphone by Gibson not quite meeting your expectation, even though that may change starting this year, as I mentioned earlier, Epiphone looks solid now. And then Squier always brought a lot of bang for the buck and was a really good value proposition. And Sterling, I tell you, I've owned a couple Sterlings in my time, and they're spectacular for the price that they sell at. Of course, you have Sterlings that cost like $800, and even when you come down to like $299, their guitars are really spectacularly put together. And Sterling line of guitars, again, did not disappoint this year either. All right, and then even before the show, a lot of social media posting out of Fortin Amplification Fortin, I think they're good friends with Ola, by the way. So their booth had Solar guitars to test with, and they brought out a new amp called Sigil, which was a lunchbox size amp, which sounded great. Again, their booth was just mad popping at all times. A lot of genty, a lot of metal kind of guys always just crowding that booth. Sigil sounded great for what I could hear. And then I want to touch on Friedman Amplification, which Friedman, each year it seems like their presence is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And they had this big area which they shared with Soldano Amplification, and more on Soldano later. And then Wampler pedals, a couple other like a boutique amp companies, and you know, Friedman now has a huge full line of guitars, which is made by Grover Jackson. And I tell you what, those Friedman guitars are awesome, man. Whether you're looking at Cali, whether you're looking at NoHo, I really would like to get one. They're so stupidly expensive. But Friedman amp, I tell you, if you ask me what my favorite amp is right now in the year 2020, I think it's definitely BE100, especially the HBE mode. However, they also had like a twin sister, the Dirty Shirley amp with the 2 channels. They introduced that this year, and they also had a Jake E. Lee 2-channel amplifier on display, which was announced this year. So Friedman's really coming on strong, and like I said, I think they're just getting bigger and bigger. And Dave Friedman was there, and you could clearly tell he was having a good time. Really good times at Friedman. Okay, so last couple NAMM show, I always came back thinking, wow, Ibanez is strong. Their lineup of guitars looked great, and you know, they were offering a lot of good stuff, affordable stuff, you know, fancy stuff. I always walked away thinking they really had a solid portfolio of guitars for, you know, us guitar players. Now this year, so here's the deal. Nina Strauss's Jiva now has one smaller model and a different color burst, which I think is really good looking. They had Yvette Young signature model, which kind of looks like a Tallman model from yesteryear. Yvette Young, phenomenal guitar player, not quite my cup of tea, but great player. And she had a signature guitar out, and I'm sure you guys know by now, Steve Vai has a new signature guitar. It's I don't think they call it Gem, I think they call it Pia, which is the name of his wife apparently. So it has a different grip, different cutout on the shape of Gem guitar that you and I know of. So instead of the monkey grip hole, it now has this 2 yin and yang cutout thing, and it had different colors and looked pretty strong. Looked just, you know, felt solid when you held it in your hand, and really good. Now, overall impression out of the Ibanez booth was that I felt like they were on the defense. They weren't necessarily attacking the market. They were more on the defense and kind of a maintain status quo. We don't need to do anything crazy right now. Maybe, you know, they felt their sale was strong enough and they didn't have to come out doing anything groundbreaking. So, you know, nothing super exciting, but nonetheless very solid presence at the NAMM show. And then my friends at Legator Guitars, they're just right down the freeway here from where I am, and I got a couple of great friends there, including the very owner, and they had a revamped the lineup of their guitars. And one of my very close friends is a endorsed artist of Legator, so he was over there shredding it up. And Legator, always solid, always fun visiting, because NAMM, you know, I think I said this before in other episodes, but you know, watching the new gear being introduced is one thing, but NAMM show to me always is about, you know, saying hi and hooking up with the friends that you haven't seen in a year, and you shake hands and you kind of get caught up on what they're up to and stuff like that. So Legator is always fun time for me for that particular reason. Alright, so Line 6, which is now owned by Yamaha. Line 6 had a new product out called Pod Go, which is the floorboard looking the amp modeler and pedal modeler kind of deal. And I think it sells for $450 here in the States, and you know, it's a really solid looking unit, but to me it seems like, where do you draw the line where you get that instead of HX Stomp or like the gig board from Head Rush? So you know, it sounded great, and Paul Hindmarsh, who's the demo artist for Line 6, as always, he was killing it, and the stuff sounded great. The stuff looked light and portable, so for those of you gigging, fly rig and whatnot, you know, maybe that's where the market is. But if you are into, so it has like a 9 DSP blocks limit, and then first 4 or 5 is always taken, so you do have somewhat of a limitation. You can't run 2 amp blocks simultaneously like the much more powerful Helix units, but all the modeling of the amps and pedals and stuff, that's all HX models, so it's the same model that drives the much more expensive Helix stuff. So that seemed interesting, but I walked away from Line 6 thinking, nothing really groundbreaking. Like last couple of years, Line 6 was also pushing hard for their line of guitars like the Variax and Shuriken guitars, especially Shuriken guitar. You know, I don't know if I saw one this year, as much push they had last couple of years for that, so whatever. So Kiesel Guitars, which always has a strong presence there, and even way back from Carvin days, you know, their business model is factory to consumer direct, so they're not there to recruit any dealers and whatever. So it's always a kind of a trailblazing if you think about it, because they're there to just to show off their stuff and look what we can do, look what we have. And they had some great looking stuff, especially this guitar, which I will show on the screen right now. I mean, this thing was a trippy as F, and a lot of people say, you know, they have a hit and miss with Kiesel guitars when you order. Sometimes you get some good stuff, sometimes people get some less than ideal stuff from them. I ordered my Kiesel, and that thing is one of my favorite guitars, easily top 10, possibly top 5, I don't know. But mine was great, and Kiesel always shows some good quality stuff. You know, definitely US custom made, and at a price that you may be able to afford. So no bad things out of my mouth for Kiesel, and they're showing some good stuff. And I think for this model year, they also have a Strat-like guitar, much like what PRS does with the Silver Sky John Mayer thing. And then Orange Amplification, they had this very interesting looking thing. So it sells for $200 here in the States. It's a pedal, which is an amp. So I think the wattage rating was 20 watts, but basically it has a white metal enclosure, and they call it stamp because it's a stomp that is an amp. So it has a 112AX7 preamp tube, so it is a tube driven for the preamp section, but for the power section it uses a solid state, and that thing sounded fat, and that thing sounded chunky. And I mean, those of you who are gigging musicians, just having that as either your main or even as a backup on your pedal board just seemed really solid. Now, I own an Ormsby Goliath, the headless model with the fan fret thing. So I'm always interested at the Ormsby guitars, and they had a pretty decent sized booth again this year, but I thought it was a slightly underwhelming compared to last year. Last year they were introducing how they now have Dino from Fear Factory and Rusty Cooley stolen away from the Dean guitars. And so they had a pretty big, they made a pretty big splash last year, so maybe this year was not as splashy as because of that, but pretty decent showing. Really good guitars. They always sit right next to Sully guitars, by the way, which I don't know what their relationships are, but there you go. So Ormsby, really good stuff. Now there's an Italian guitar company called Paoletti, and they introduced a new signature model by none other than Richard Fortus of Guns N' Roses, and that guitar looked pretty good. I mean, it's a traditional S-type, and you know, all leather and blinged out. Pretty cool. Now, PRS, you know, I mean, some really love PRS. I know there are some of you that really don't care for PRS, but I tell you what, I mean, I have affinity for any guitar companies right now that bear the founder's name on their headstock, and that founder is still around, like the PRS, like Taylor of Bob Taylor is still around, even though a lot of designs now being handled by another master luthier, Andy Powers. So like PRS is just really great, and if you have seen my previous video, I bought a 594 McCarty S2 right before the NAMM show, which was introduced at the NAMM show, but apparently a lot of their premium dealers had them available for sale before the show, so I got one. And they introduced this is their 35th anniversary, so they had 35th anniversary models. I do own the 25th anniversary custom 24 with in Angry Larry color finish, which I adore just like none other. And so PRS had their usual greatness. I mean, crazy tops, flame maple, quilted maple, and their dragon, which I wasn't able to film. It's always so many people in there. It's very hard to even maneuver within. And they introduced the new John Mayer guitar colors. So I grabbed John Mayer guitar. Now, in previous years, I was never a big, huge Strat fan, so I kind of didn't really pay attention. But year 2019 was an odd year where I really got into the Strats and Tellys, and so naturally I pulled down the John Mayer off the wall, and I kind of took a look at it. It feels really good, that guitar, and the 7.5-inch radius, you would think that is too round and feels weird, but I tell you what, that guitar felt great, and the neck profile was somewhat unique. It didn't feel like a traditional PRS neck, and really nothing to complain about. I don't know if I'm gonna get a Mayer PRS Silver Sky this year, but one may be in the future or later on down the road if a right deal comes along. You just never know. So Strandberg, the headless guitar with the Argo neck that is famous, they are just, it appears they are growing at crazy pace. Their booth used to be the minimum size booth over at NAMM. Now they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're taking a really big foothold, especially with the headless crowd. And you know, their signature artists like the Sarah Longfield, and their guitars are looking really solid. And as you know, I own one, the Cre Guitars, and year 2019 was a really good year for me in terms of I ended up picking up a brand new Cre, and what a guitar. And you know, Cre Guitars have been one of my dream guitar for many years, so I was really happy when I got that. I haven't shown you yet, but hopefully gear chat of that guitar will be coming soon. So Cre had a really good booth. They had their core lines, the P. Thorne models, and Matteo Sato line of guitars, and they had new PT15 amp without the, I think, IR section. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the new amp stuff, but their guitars always look solid and just great stuff. One of the guys, again, one of the founders' name being on the headstock, that's pumping out really great product. So Cre Guitar definitely a great showing. There's a company called Bola Guitars, which surfaced maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I always was taken back by their cool shape. I mean, they're paying homage to the classical shape that you and I are familiar with, but there's enough twist that they're doing where the guitars look awesome. They had Robert Baker in their booth doing the demo. They had these two guys whom I don't know their names of or what band they play for, but they were there. They were shredding it up, really great stuff. I would love to have a Bola guitar, but I think they charge more than what the guitar could cost. I don't know if I'm gonna spend that amount of money on a guitar. Maybe that's not first that I look at. So, but it doesn't mean to say the guitars were not nice. Their guitars are nice. So Bola, pretty good showing. The Rev amplification, they had a new amp called the G20, which was a big, there was a big push for that amp even before the NAMM show. They mobilized their whole YouTube influencer army and Rabias of the world and who else? I mean, everybody who puts out guitar YouTube video, they had access to this G20 thing and they were putting out videos. So I was pretty familiar with that amp, and you know, that was the highlight of the Rev booth. And right next to Rev was the Torpedo company, which does the cab impulse thing. They had a new product called Cab Loader X, I think. So really good stuff. The attenuator, IR loader, and the load box, really good stuff for those of you who play just at home but without wanting to blow out all your windows at home. So, and direct recording, or just all the goodness. Torpedo always a really innovative product, and thinking and engineering and all that good stuff. So last year, Dean Guitars did not have a presence at the show, but if you're watching my last year's NAMM coverage video, I did mention how there were two Dean skanks walking around the show floor with one Dean guitar and scantily clad, and obviously, you know, they're trying to catch the eyeballs of predominantly male population over at the NAMM show. This year they didn't have that. They had a tiny small table at the edge of the show floor, and there was no guitar. There was one girl sitting there. Maybe she was just there to answer questions about, you know, dealer inquiries or whatever. But Dean, you know, who's fixing their image and everything, you know, I see how on social they're coming out with the new dime guitars, and you know, Dave Mustaine is still with Dean, and Michael Schenker's still with Dean. So they do have a pretty big names in their portfolio, but their presence, which used to be big, over the top, you know, over the top presence, now they are whittled down to nothing. So and one of you asked me on Facebook, hey, where was the Dean booth? And you know, there was no Dean booth. There was Dean table. Rob Chapman, who is embroiled in this controversy. Rob Chapman exposed the video. So you know, I'm not gonna say anything about that whole situation. Chapper seemed like a pretty nice guy. I don't know if he puts up a different persona on the screen versus the real. I don't know. Anyhow, Chapman was there, and the day before the NAMM show, he put out a video on his channel that he shot on his cell phone. How he was thanking his fans that's stuck with him throughout the turmoil that he's been going through. And so that, I don't know, it seems like he's trying a little too hard to defend himself. And if he has nothing to hide, maybe he's going a little bit overboard. I don't know. There are two sides to every story. Rob may be doing the right thing. I just don't know. But Chapman, I think, had a new model, ML 10th anniversary, ML1, I think. But again, not my cup of tea kind of guitar, so I didn't really pay attention. But I did see Rob on the show floor, pretty cool. And then, speaking of exposed, the same guy who did this exposed video, I won't mention the channel's name, but he also, all these exposed videos have been pulled down, and he did a thing on Glenn Fricker, the something studio. Glenn Fricker is the long hair guy, slightly heavy set. He's the guy that makes fun of bassists being stupid, and he hates Line 6. Well, supposedly, anyways. So on that video I watched, and God, what? Now Glenn Fricker, I don't know him, and I don't attack someone that is not here to fight back for himself, so I won't say anything negative. But if you have a chance to watch that video, even though it's pulled down, maybe it's just a private link, I don't know, but you get to find out some sketchy things about that channel. And I did see Glenn out on the show floor. He was just walking alone, and you know, my channel, the MO, always has been, I'm showing you gear that I personally bought and own. Everything I show you is just stuff that I paid for. Every guitar that you're gonna see is what I paid for, and I take no review unit. I mean, let's face it, no company is gonna send me any review unit. I don't have enough channel power or the views to pull that kind of weight. So, you know, I'm able to tell you exactly how I feel about certain things, and when I say unbiased and true, It's really me. But you know, you could totally see the underbelly of the whole social media influencer BS world, where you know the guys are, you know, taking on money, marketing budget from a company that would ask YouTube influencers to pay money to feature their product on the channel. And you know, that's the type of world we live in, and there's nothing wrong with that, because that's the new norm now. And you know, previous, even like the Super Bowl ads, it's not what they used to be. It's just a shift in the market, where now there are new methods to roll products out and such, like the what Rev does. And nothing wrong with it. However, if you know, you're coming out on the YouTube and you're saying you are unbiased and you are true and whatever, but and yet in the behind the curtain you're taking money and such, that's a sketch. Anyhow, so that whole thing. And speaking of YouTubers, I mean, all your usual people were there. Mary Spender, the Captain Anderton, Danish Pete, 60 Cycle Hum. I don't know his name, but it seemed like he actually had his own booth. I don't know. I'm cheating by looking on my screen who I saw. Like the Fluff was there. Henning, I think that's his name. ETYCH42, whatever his channel name is. A really funky channel name, but he was there. Who else was there? Philip Mcknight. Arnold, who I like. Arnold Plays Guitar. I think that's his name of the channel. He recently moved to Texas. So him, the Gear Gods guy, what's his name? Trey Xavier. So he was there. Steve from Boston, artist previously known as Pixie Licks, he was there. Rick Beato, Reshol, who I love dearly. They also had a little chat session over at the Gibson booth, which was good. If you have not checked out Reshol's channel, you definitely owe yourself to go check out his videos. Awesome. Glenn Fricker, like I mentioned earlier, Robert Baker. I mean, everybody that you know of was there to put out their own content. This video is really going long, so I'm gonna just cut right to the chase now. So that was my section 1. So let's talk about interesting shit. So there was a company called the Cre Guitar, which was really well made, and the whole neck had this mechanism where the guitar will fold in half. Again, it's not anything you haven't seen before with the travel guitar with the folding neck, but this thing was done so nicely and really blew my mind. And as you're seeing what I'm showing on the screen, just great stuff, really awesome. And then second company I want to talk about is a company called the Gyrock. So maybe you're familiar with a company called the Relish Guitars, where you could swap pickups in and out without having to resolder and such. So Gyrock had this line of guitars where you could have, so you load up all these different pickups, and you could just use this rotary switch pickup selector to go from one pickup to the other. And they had these modular pickup system where you could just swap in and out of the pickups as you see fit. I was blown away by that. And maybe it's not as big of an innovation as one may think, but that really was awesome to see. Just really good stuff. Type of innovation maybe the industry could have used, and thinking outside of the box. I remember Philip Mcknight's live streaming show maybe about a month ago, and he said he's working on a guitar with some company where he could test out pickups, compare pickups A and B without having to resolder, and just do it right there then. And he didn't divulge into what type of guitar it was. Somebody asked if it was Relish. He said it wasn't Relish, and maybe this is the guitar he was talking about. So keep an eye on that. Alright, that said, some of the things that I also want to share. Rise of this guy called Sammy Bowler. So Sammy does not have a YouTube channel. He's not a content creator, content pusher, but he does have Instagram and such. He was the guy that was playing guitars at the Friedman booth, demoing their product. This guy, phenomenal. If you have not checked out, check him out. He was also featured in the Michael Nielsen's channel recently. He normally shows up with the Friedman gear. What a player. I mean, one of the better players I've seen in my recent years, bar none. Phenomenal guitar player. Great feel, great technique. Oh my God. I would kill, literally, I would literally kill for 1,000th of the talent this guy has. Of course, I'm sure he spent 1,000 millions of hours crafting his skills. Soldano had his line of amps at next to Friedman. So Mike Soldano, who is known for you know, the what's the name, the Hot Rod 100 from yesteryear. About 10 years ago, I want to say, he was partnering up with guys and had a line of amp that he designed through a company called Jet City Amplification. I don't know if Jet City dissolved. I don't see them anymore. And Mike had his own, you know, Soldano line of amps just separately, which I thought was a little weird. I don't know what's going on with that whole thing. So Mike Soldano, maybe he's back on his own. Every company now has a modeler. So Line 6 has the Helix, Pod Go, Kemper has their floor unit, Headrush has their thing. There's a company called Neural DSP, which made a big splash this year with their Cortex. What's the name of the product? Quantum Cortex? I forget the name. But Neural DSP has an AI learning, you know, floor modeler, and who else? Moore has a line of floor modeler. I mean, everybody has modeler, to a point where I think the modelers outnumber the actual real amps that they are trying to model out on the show floor. So that was again kind of a, you can kind of see the shift where the industry is heading. And you know, bedroom guitar players and guys that are gigging guys that don't want to lug around the back line, I get it. But there's a lot of modelers out on the world right now. And also, just overall, every single company, the colors is a big thing this year. Everybody has new colors, new eye-popping colors, neon colors, and just so much vibrance, a lot of sparkly stuff. And so gone are the yesteryears of black, white, red guitars. I mean, there is so many different color options available. And of course, I'm not the biggest proponent of keeping the same name guitar, but just paint it different color and just strut that out. I'm not a big fan of that. However, I think a lot of companies have caught on where we also want something besides just, you know, burst, and something besides the standard colors. And we as consumers are being offered more color options, which is a welcome change. And you know, the NAMM show, I explained the last year, but it used to be where companies go out and sign up dealers and take on orders from the dealers and such. But now the whole dynamics have changed, I feel like. I mean, that stuff still goes on, but you see a lot of YouTube and social media influencers out there creating content. And that's how companies take advantage of basically the free advertising. Maybe they're paying them under the table, I don't know. But you know, you got all these guys walking around the show floor. Everybody's walking around with a freaking camera. And a lot of YouTubers out there, they're walking out there with camera, possibly with a cameraman and a light man. And that's another reason why, you know, you don't see me doing the same thing like I used to, where I used to show you guitars with a cameraman, you know, pointing at me, so I was able to show you guitar as myself, like this style. But I don't have that help anymore. I'm walking around just by myself. I'm a one-man show, so I can't do that. So, you know, I'm holding the camera, so I'm just showing you the guitar. I'm not able to show you the guitar as me as a presenter. But you got all these guys walking around with the stuff, and they're doing their thing, and content's being created that way. So companies are taking advantage of the marketing of their new stuff being rolled out that way. So the whole dynamics have definitely changed, for the better or worse, I don't know, but that's kind of what the NAMM show has become. There's just a lot of guys out there creating content for their own good, or maybe they're being commissioned. Like Rubia's out there doing his stuff for Andertons, and he's part of their crew, and Andertons always has a huge crew. So you got Captain, you got Rubia, you got Danish Pete, and for Chapman, you see Matt and Rubia, and, you know, Premier Guitars walk around with so many crew, and you know, whatever. So it's always good times, but that's how this year's NAMM show ended. There was a lot of good stuff to see. This year I felt was more exciting than maybe last year, maybe the year before. There were a couple years of stretch where things were looking a little iffy, but I really liked what I saw this year. Minus the NAMMthrax that I came back with. but it is what it is. Okay, so you see some new guitars. This I got sometime last year, like during the summertime, but I haven't had time to show it to you. Next video will be the PRS 594 McCarty S2 that I recently got, which I'm gonna show you more in depth. So I'll come back to you sooner than later. All right, this has been a super lengthy video. I thank you if you have stuck around this long. I love every one of you, and I've been Triple G. You've been super awesome. Until next time, you guys take care of yourself, and most importantly, be good humans. Triple G out.